new to me.
So Carol,
I think if your green light's on, you're on.
I think so too.
So the microphone is.
Yep, I can hear you.
Mhm.
Too well.
Robert, we're ready to go, it sounds like. Okay. My name's Debbie Miller. I'm president with the Greater Woodland Park Chamber of Commerce, and I want to thank you all for those of you who've joined us in person and those of you who've joined us online. We're so glad to have you online this evening. Bear with us tonight. We're trying out some new technology. We are recording, I hope. As I watch them go over to my computer, I'm like, I have no idea. Oh, I got the thumbs up. Okay, we are recording. This is good. And so I want to thank you all for coming out and participating with us this evening. This is our Tellor County Candidates Forum, and this is for the primary election that will be on June 30th. And it is my pleasure at this time to introduce our moderator for the evening, and the lady that's going to keep everybody in line tonight. Our moderator is Carol Harvey. Carol, thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Well, good evening, and thank you for joining us for the forum here for Tellor County Commission candidates and for the Colorado 4th Judicial District Attorney candidates. But I've got some rules of engagement for the evening. So candidate seating on the platform was determined by a candidate's draw prior to the commencement of this forum, and introductions and closing remarks will be in the order as you see our gentleman on the dais. We have a timekeeper who will indicate 30 seconds before your time ends and then stop once your time is up. Following the introductory statements, I will ask each candidate to describe what they hope to accomplish as a Tellor County Commissioner. That'll be for 1 minute each. Your introductions will be for 2 minutes each. I also have a list of questions that are unknown to the candidates. These questions are in some cases based on publicly available information about the candidate. Others are drawn from previous forum examples. And again, those responses will be limited to 1 minute. Following this segment of the forum, I will entertain questions from the audience and from the press. We'll start with the press and then go to audience questions. Those may be submitted by our audience members here, and Deb and I are also monitoring Zoom for any that will come in right now. We've already got 32 participants. Great. Finally, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement, and I would simply ask that you be respectful of the timekeeper and the other candidates. I'd like to start with a few comments from Crystal Brown, our Tellor County Clerk and Recorder, who's going to talk to us about the election process this year. Crystal?
Am I good about right here?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank Debbie Miller and the Greater Chamber of Woodland Park Commerce for hosting this event, and then also for having me so I can speak a little bit on the June primary election. This election, as you all know, is going to be different than anything that we have ever experienced before. So with that, please know that we are going to have temporary rules. We have, in place as far as set down from the Secretary of State's office, and it's going to be new to us. But with that, I would really, really like to stress to the fact of no matter if there's a pandemic going on, if there's a fire going on, my rules, our rules as my staff goes, we are here to have safe and secure elections. That's what we are here for, no matter what the crisis is. So please feel safe to vote your ballot that you're going to receive in the mail. Colorado, we are an all-mail ballot since 1303. So in 2013, which is 7 years ago, we became an all-mail ballot. We have been practicing this process. So when you see in the media, don't vote your mail ballot, make sure, stand in line. That's not for Colorado. We're pros at what we do. So my biggest thing I can tell you is please feel safe to vote that ballot that you have in the convenience of your own home. So, and I do know that some of you will need to go to the vote center. So we will have a vote center. It's going to be at the Woodland Park Library, as we've had in the past. But, this year with our temporary rules, we are going to have different procedures set. So we are going to require that you have to wear a mask. You will have to do social distancing. We can only have 2 people in the election room at the time to vote. So just make sure that have patience with my judges. If you you do need to go in, but we do have the ADA, the ICX if you need to go in and vote. But, and then also this year, we're doing something a little bit different. We're gonna do a curbside pickup. So I'm gonna have 2 election judges from separate parties that will be under a canopy at the Woodland Park Library, and they will come to you at the curb. You can deposit your ballot. It's safe, it's secure. You don't even have to get out of your car. Now we also have 2 24-hour drop boxes in Tellor County. We have one in the Woodland Park area, which is at the 800 Research Drive. And that's 24 hours. You can drop it off anytime after work, whatever, early in the morning. Same with the Cripple Creek drop box that we have. It's 24 hours. It's in front of the courthouse, 101 West Bennett Avenue. So we encourage you to drop those ballots. Now you can mail your ballot, but just make sure that if you do mail your ballot, you mail it before June 22nd. We have to have those ballots prior to June 30th at 7 o'clock, not a postmark. So make sure you get your ballots in. Also, you know, we'd like for you to use the drop box because the less hands it touches, the safer it is for our election judges. And with that, I know that I've given you all a lot of information in just a few minutes, but feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'd be happy to answer any questions. My website has all of the locations, times, everything on it. I will be putting articles in both of the local newspapers with all of the dates and times. You can email us, call us, and then also check our Facebook page. Make sure you keep up. We do put out updated messages. So I would like to once again thank you. Good luck to all of you candidates. Best of luck, and make sure everybody counts. Every vote counts. Thanks all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Crystal. And we now have 39 participants. That's great. If I can, from my left to right, I'd like to introduce our candidates for County Commissioner: Mella, David Rusterhotlz, Erik Stone, and Dan Williams. And our 2 district attorney candidates are Michael Allen and Mark Waller. And I mentioned before, after you complete your 2-minute introduction, I will ask you a specific question, and that is what you hope to accomplish either as a commissioner or as a 4th Judicial District Attorney. So if I may start with Phil. Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thanks to Debbie Miller and the Chamber for hosting this event, and to Carol Harvey for her role as a moderator. I'd like to begin with a thought experiment. Think back to a time when you were in a job interview. The hiring manager is likely asked what work you've done that justifies hiring you. Well, I see this as an interview, and you, the voters, as the hiring managers. Let me tell you why I think I'm well qualified for this position. As a Woodland Park City Councilman, I sat up on this dais for 2 meetings a month for 7 years, for a total of about 165 meetings, and I cast about 1,500 votes on a wide variety of issues, including management and oversight of a multi-million-dollar budget safeguarding the taxpayers' hard-earned money, the same as a county commissioner, code and land use issues that directly impacted residents and business owners, the same as a county commissioner, reviewing and voting on complicated business and development plans, the same as a county commissioner, reviewing and voting on complex consultant contracts, just like a county commissioner, and responding to emergencies. In June of 2002, when I took the oath of office, the Hayman fire broke out. I played a key role as a member of the emergency response team, a multi-jurisdictional group that met every day at the police department. We made tough decisions based on rapidly evolving events, the weather, and in particular, whether we should actually evacuate the city. Again, the same kind of challenge a county commissioner might well face. So if you want someone with relevant, local, elective experience, someone who has been tested and found successful, I'm your man. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mella. Mr. Rusterhotlz.
We have been blessed. We've been given life and liberty, freedom of speech, and the right to peacefully assemble, to worship God as we see fit. We have the right to own property and businesses, to equal protection under the law, along with many other blessings of liberty. And to protect these rights, the right to own and bear arms. Where have these rights come from that we Americans cherish so dearly? Rights that have made these United States the envy of the world. Not from a benevolent government. They've been given to us by Almighty God. We are a self-governing people protected from our government and our elected servants by a constitution that recognizes these rights. So why am I running for county commissioner? Like you, I have seen many examples of government intrusions into the rights of citizens. I'm tired of voting people into office, and when they get there, they somehow miraculously gain 50 IQ points. They tell us how to live our lives, build our homes, run our businesses, and how long our businesses will stay closed. Each new law, regulation, and emergency order chips away at the liberty that is our birthright. I am compelled to push back. What do I bring to this race? I bring 35 years of real-world business experience. I know what it's like to start a successful business, develop a product and service, take the risks, organize and lead the people, sign the fronts of checks, fight local bureaucracies, and turn challenges into opportunities. I have never worked for the government except to pay taxes, nor have I run for a political office, and these days, that seems to be an asset. I won't BS you pretending to have all the answers to the challenges we face as a community. Tonight, I want you to hear my core values, those foundational guiding principles of liberty that I hold sacred. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rusterhotlz. And now, Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey. Good evening, Tellor County. I'm Erik Stone, and I'm running to be your Tellor County Commissioner for District 3. I want to thank the Woodland Park Chamber of Commerce, Debbie Miller, and Carol Harvey for moderating tonight. You know, I wish we could have thrown the doors open today and allowed our friends and neighbors in this room, but for those who've joined us online, it's good to be seen, I guess, because we can't see you, but it is certainly, we welcome you here. You know, when I decided to enter the race to become your next county commissioner from District 3, I did so because I believe that the commissioners are going to have to do more. We're going to have to do more to protect the rights of the citizens of Tellor County from those in Denver that want to infringe upon them. I said we would have to form new coalitions among county commissioners across the state to fight to preserve our way of life. You know, back then when I announced it was red flag laws and anti-Second Amendment laws. But the last 3 months, we've seen unchecked power from the governor and unconstitutional infringements on full display. Our citizens have looked to our county elected officials to protect their businesses and their rights, along with preserving the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. So what could commissioners do in the face of unchecked powers? You know, if our commissioners announce that we're just going to defy the governor's orders and we're going to encourage businesses to open, you know, they're gambling with chips that they don't own. They're gambling with the life savings and the businesses of their constituents in a game where the state holds all the cards. One county standing alone against unchecked power from the state is a losing battle, with our business owners paying the ultimate price. That's why I'm happy to announce today that when elected, I will be joining other newly elected commissioners from around the state, including former Colorado Senate President Kevin Grantham from Fremont County, to found the Colorado Commissioners Freedom Coalition. It's a coalition of county commissioners dedicated to preserving the natural rights of the citizens that we serve. We have to protect them by not by defying these laws and orders, but by challenging them together as a coalition of counties. A vote for Erik Stone is a vote for principled conservative leadership. I will be a champion for Tellor County, and I ask for your players and your vote.
And thank you, Mr. Stone.
Thank you.
If you haven't noticed yet, this is the timekeeper. So,
I did miss that, but thank you.
Yeah. Dan, please.
Good evening. I'm Dan Williams, and I'm running for Tellor County Commissioner for District 1 to replace term limited Mark Dettenreader. Again, I'd also like to thank Carol and Deb and the City of Woodland Park for allowing us to do this. I know it took some time. Friends, a year ago, when I told you I'd enter the race, I discussed with you some of my concerns that Tellor County was at a critical junction in its history, that we were at a crossroads. Then what I was thinking about is our lack of attainable housing, our rising nitrate levels in our older subdivisions, our traffic issues, the homeless population in our forests. Over half of Tellor County doesn't even belong to us. It's federal. The list goes on. I can tell you after 3 months of helping our first responders combat the pandemic along with our state and our nation, We now face great economic uncertainty. These problems that we have aren't insurmountable, but we've got some real challenges. We've got folks right now in our county who are unemployed, furloughed. Some have been given notices that they won't be allowed back to work or asked to come back to work. We have businesses that are stumbling to regain their footing. Our casinos are closed. And if you don't know, that's the majority of our economy right now. The list goes on. Folks, here's the message. You need a strong leader now. I'm not ashamed to tell you I'm the leadership candidate. You know, it's about service. I've served my country and my county for 36 years as well. I have my own business. I'm a consultant. But what I want to talk about is the government and work within the rule of law. We've got some great business owners. I know them personally. I know our city, our mayors, our city councils. I know our business developers, our faith-based folks. I know our first responders very well. I've had a chance to work with heroes. It's going to take those relationships. It's going to take that experience to go to the next level and to really focus on economic recovery, because no matter what we tell you up here, we're going to inherit a mess. We're going to inherit a challenge, not because our current commissioners haven't done a good job. They've done everything they can along with our city governments for a pandemic nobody saw coming. We've got tough challenges, and I'm ready for that challenge on day one. And I'd ask for your vote for District 1 Tellor County Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Allen.
Thank you. Good evening, Tellor County, and thank you to the Woodland Park Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event tonight. It's always great to get out here in Tellor County and see all the friendly faces, at least the ones in the room, kind of like Erik was talking about. We can't see you on screen. You know, there's a great leadership tradition in district attorneys' offices across the state of Colorado. And there are three names that perfectly exemplify that: Chris Watts, James Holmes, and Patrick Frazee. What do they all have in common? They were all prosecuted. The lead prosecutor on those cases was the elected district attorney in each of those jurisdictions. Michael Rourke in Weld County, George Brockler in Arapahoe County, and Dan May here in Tellor County. Big, high-profile cases require capable DAs that can handle those tough cases. I am uniquely qualified on that front. I've been involved in many homicide investigations, and every single homicide defendant that I've taken to trial, I've convicted and put in prison for a long, long time. That's why Dan May, your current district attorney here in the 4th Judicial District, has endorsed me in this race. And Sheriff Jason Mikesell as well has also endorsed me in this race. You know, those big cases are not just about the defendants, though. In fact, I think they're more about the victims. Victims whose voices have been taken from them, who can't come into a courtroom and speak for themselves, demanding justice. People like Shannon Watts and her daughters Bella and Celeste, the 12 homicide victims in that Aurora theater and the 70 wounded, and then of course Kelsey Barrett. They all each demand and deserve justice, and they deserve a district attorney who is able on day one to go into a courtroom and fight for justice on their behalf. I am that candidate. That's why I have the support of law enforcement, the Colorado Springs Police Protective Association, Dan May, and your sheriff here in Tellor County. I have real, relevant, and ongoing experience. That experience has given me the tools necessary to fight for victims in the courtroom. I've been doing it for 16 years as a prosecutor, and the last 9 here in El Paso County and Tellor County as your senior deputy district attorney. My name is Michael Allen. I hope to earn your support.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Now, Mr. Waller.
Thank you. And like everybody said, thanks for putting this on and the opportunity to be here. But more than that, man, it is great to finally get to be with some people again. Holy mackerel. I wish more organizations would have the chutzpah that you all have and have more of these sorts of forums. I think it's time for us to get back at it, that's for sure. You know, the job of district attorney is a leadership position. And it's a position that requires experience. It's a position that requires not just some experience, a stovepipe kind of experience. It's a position that requires all of the experience. These tough times, if they've taught us nothing else, we have to have people in elected office that can do the job on the first day in office. That means being able to be a leader, being able to be, for a district attorney, being able to be the calm in the storm when we have bad things happening, when we're trying to figure out what to do with people violating COVID orders, when we're trying to figure out how to handle people that are rioting in the streets and how to calm that situation. It is so much more than just having that in courtroom experience. You know, I'm the guy here that has prosecuted terrorists in Iraq. Some people dispute that. Go look it up. Look up the record. You can see it there for yourself. I did that as a judge advocate in the Air Force. I have prosecuted criminal cases here in Colorado as a deputy district attorney for the 10th Judicial District down in Pueblo. But more than that, I have fought for your rights in Denver. We need a district attorney that has all of the experience, because without that, there's no way we're going to be successful. I'm the only guy in this race that has all of the relevant experience necessary to be successful on the first day.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now you have a feel for what 2 minutes feels like. Now we're going to go to 1 minute, and I'm going to go in the same order. 1 minute, if you could explain or describe what you hope to accomplish either as a county commissioner or as a district attorney. And Mr. Mella, we'll start with you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I've got several areas that I'll be focusing on. Transportation, including the reliever route, forest management, wildfire mitigation, examining opportunities to expand affordable or workforce housing, and maintaining a fiscally conservative budget, and being very active at Colorado Counties Incorporated to collaborate with like-minded commissioners. And I'll just go as much as I can here before I get cut off. I've attended the Pikes Peak Area Council of Government meeting to understand the important interface between CDOT and counties. In January, the PPACG board approved the 2045 long-term transportation plan. Chapter 5 includes the reliever route. Obviously, with the budget cuts, it's unlikely to happen anytime soon. Forest management. Wildfires continue to be a threat, specifically in the wildland-urban interface. I've been attending the multi-jurisdictional Tellor County Wildfire Council since January of 2019. Been very active in that. Housing. There's a lack of adequate workforce housing. I'm interested in public-private relationships like the one in Colorado Springs, which requires no out-of-pocket money for the government, but is simply a facilitator using what are called private activity bonds. And they can work between public and private to be good for folks who are trying to find housing.
Thank you, Mr. Mella. Now you know what 1 minute feels like.
Yeah, fast.
Mr. Rusterhotlz.
Thank you. I moved to Tellor County 17 years ago from Pennsylvania, and my job has taken me continuously to people's houses and talking to builders, people who live here, business owners. And one of the reasons I discovered or decided to run for county commissioner is because I hear from so many people that the elected people seem to be insulated from others. Now, partially it's a perception, but one of the things I want to do, and first and foremost, is make myself obviously available to the people of the county. I want to also, I've worked with builders and come up with some plans. I have numerous builders that are supporting me in this race to streamline the building process. Also for transportation, certainly to work towards finding a relief route, but otherwise to help move traffic through Woodland Park, working with City Council. I want to make sure that we work with the cities, with the 2 cities in the county. And thank you.
Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey. You know, one of the big goals that I have has already started, which I just spoke about, which is a new coalition of county commissioners that are focused on the natural rights of citizens. That's a really big deal and something that's never been done before. But also here, you know, within the county, number one is it's really important that we now take a look at our road and bridge department, especially in light of what may be difficult economic times in the near future, and develop a long-term plan to ensure that we have the resources that they need in order to adequately maintain our roads, both in the quality as well as in you know, the snow removal and maintenance. So wildfire mitigation is also a big area that Woodland Park always has to be involved in. And lastly, you know, a really big part of what I would like to accomplish when I'm on the county commission is to take a greater role in the Southern Shooting Partnership to identify public shooting areas where we can safely do that. And I've run out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Mr. Williams.
You know, the primary mission of a county commissioner is to protect the life, health, and safety, the welfare of its residents. And for that, I would also say livelihood. So I'm really concerned about the future of Tellor County. We got a bright future, but we need real leaders. And so what I'm looking at is a couple of vulnerable populations. Let's start with our older folks. You know, last year we took a 30% rise in property taxes. This year, we're probably looking at a loss of our senior exemption and our veterans and our disabled veterans. If we're not careful, we're going to have long-term residents, native Tellor County folks being forced out. I'm also concerned about our children. We had our 10th suicide this week, as some of you know, and that was a child. You know, so this has got to stop. We've got to have unity. We've got to reach out to each other, save our businesses, and get away from the divisiveness. So my number one concern right now and my number one mission is to preserve Tellor County, just as our motto says, protect the past, embrace the future. Thanks. Thank
you, Mr. Williams. Tell me when you're ready, Deb. I've been moving her along too fast. She's
Gotcha.
Yes. Mr. Allen, please, 1 minute.
Thank you. You know, the DA's office, the primary responsibility of a prosecutor's office is public safety, but it's also about protecting your constitutional rights. I've been out on cases where somebody has killed somebody and I've not filed a case. You know why that is? Because we have the right to defend ourselves, and that's how we protect people's constitutional rights as a DA. I want to continue that tradition. I also want to continue to lead the state in prosecution of violent and career criminals. We typically have 200 felony trials in the 4th Judicial District every single year. I want to continue to lead the state in that number. I want to revamp the homicide unit. We have unfortunately had a rash of high-profile, big homicide cases. I'm prosecuting one now. I want to make sure that we get the best prosecutors on those cases, and I think the DA should be able to handle those cases, and I will do that. I also plan to create an animal cruelty unit. And I want to ensure everybody, I will not be involved in red flag enforcement as your next district attorney.
Thank you. Ready? Mr. Waller, please.
Thank you. I got to tell you, I kind of wish the DA's office wouldn't lead the state in any statistical category, because that means that we're being safe and that we live in one of the safest communities in the entire state. I believe that's the job, the role of the district attorney, is to make the community safer. It's not about prosecuting more cases. It's about making us safer. Sometimes that does mean prosecuting cases. And I think one of the things that we need to be focused on is going after illegal grow operations. We also need to be eliminating human trafficking in our communities. That's horrible, horrific acts that happen in our communities. But I think almost most importantly, we need to protect your right to protect yourself. And that means fighting for the kinds of legislation necessary to allow you to exercise your Second Amendment rights. We had DAs in this state, Republican DAs, that supported red flag legislation in 2018, and that's why it's the law today.
Thank you, Mr. Waller. Okay, well, I have a couple of comments I want to make at this point in time. If I didn't get this point across before, this is not a debate, it is a forum. And the reason that we're using that format, number one, is because we have a large slate of candidates and limited time. But we want this to be a deliberate approach, and it's intended as an opportunity to get the issues to the voters, what they care about, discussed before the actual election. So the questions that I have now for the commission candidates, these will be focused on core government responsibilities of providing the essential services of public safety, roads, and health while maintaining an environment amendable to citizen life and livelihood. The questions are designed to help citizens recognize candidates' personal views on providing essential services while supporting individual liberty, free enterprise, and limited accountable government. For our district attorney candidates, the questions will give you each an opportunity to provide your concept of the administration of justice, victim advocacy, and partnering with law enforcement and the citizens of Tellor and El Paso counties in order to deter and prevent crime. Kind of mom and apple pie for the district attorney's office. So I'll begin with
I'm sure that's what we're both about.
I'm sure it is. And I look forward to your responses. We'll start with county commissioner candidates, and I'll start with Mr. Rusterhotlz. And then we will come back to Mr. Mella, and then I will start the DA questions with Mr. Allen, and then we will bounce back and forth. So, David, Tellor County's been highly successful in managing the COVID-19 pandemic, at least in my opinion. What have you contributed to that success? And if elected as county commissioner, what would you do differently to prepare the county for the next emergency, which could be COVID-20 in the fall or a fire this summer?
Right.
And 1 minute.
What I've done during this time is recognize the hurting people and business owners across the county. I've been out to numerous businesses, at least 3 per weekend during this entire shutdown period, helping them bring people to their business, to bring out curbside food, curbside service. I've been to them, I've listened to them, and that's why so many of them are supporting me for commissioner. What would I have done differently? I believe that if government does something, the private sector can usually do it better, unless it's collecting taxes or our great United States military. I believe I would have first approached the hospital, asked them to put them in charge because their expertise is healthcare. I would have supported it with local government as they found necessary because they do healthcare full time.
Thank you, Mr. Rusterhotlz, I'm sorry.
Rusty Bolts, Rusterhotlz.
I like that. Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mrs. Harvey. First off, when it comes to what I've done in regards to the COVID-19 response, number one is there's a call that went out in the county for volunteers, both for skills as well as materials. So I went through the look of the needs that they had and volunteered with the county with the equipment, skills that I had to offer the county. It was really important, and more than any other person sitting up here, I spent a tremendous amount of time plugged into our county commissioners and to our emergency response team. There is no better opportunity to learn how to handle a crisis than to watch the people who are handling it today. And our county commissioners have done a pretty fantastic job. But the one thing that I would do different, though, is they need to have better communication. There need to be better communication to show exactly what they were doing and explain why they were doing it to the people. They need to understand why it was that they couldn't just open the county back up. So kudos to our commissioners for the work that they've done. But again, there needs to be much better communication. And my history in digital marketing and in communication is of great value to accomplish that.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Mr. Williams, same question.
It was my privilege to be with Heroes for the last 3 months. I was part of the crisis response force, and Dave's right. The hospital is at primacy. Unfortunately, they only had 12 beds. And so we catered a capability for 150 beds at a surge hospital. Thank God we didn't need. We created a morgue that we don't have in Tellor County. We created a decontamination facility that we don't have that, by the way, is now useful. Remind you that we have cyanide trucks passing Divide every day, for example. And so 650 volunteers, faith-based communities, our hospital, our schools, making over 400 meals a day. The list just goes on. It was a privilege to be with them, and we were lucky. And I'll just leave you with this. What if we hadn't set a thing up? What would we be looking at? We lost 2 good Tellor County residents, and we have a lot of the folks. We had a couple of positives this week. Regardless of what side of the aisle folks are on that are listening at home or in this room, truth is nobody in this country knows how this ends. And so we have a capability now, even as we push to open casinos, if we get it wrong, we'll be ready. And it was a privilege to walk with the Heroes. And I agree with Erik full-heartedly. The only thing we might have done different is communicate a little bit more. But as a leader, you make decisions with what you're given at the time.
Thank you. Are you ready? Mr. Allen.
I thought you were going to go to
Mr. Mella.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mella. Well, that works.
okay.
Gives her a little more time.
So during the COVID tragedy, I did a lot of work, my wife and I, behind the scenes, and I must say anonymously, because according to Matthew 6, you do not want to be, you want to make the left hand not know what the right hand is doing. You don't want to broadcast what you're doing. But secondly, I worked with Representative Baisley and Senator Heisey to try to put together a coalition between willing Democrats to be sure that the governor, after he issues his initial emergency declaration, must go to the legislature to renew it. Only 17 states do that. Most of them do not, and it's critical. And secondly, also for them to work, I worked with them to get the county commissioners to be the seat of authority, harmonizing the work of the healthcare officials, which is critical, but making the county commissioners the ultimate arbiter of when things should begin, and that's critical. And Senator Heisey and Representative Baisley said that they will take that and go with it, those recommendations.
Thanks, Phil. She's going to switch her camera. Mr. Allen, you'd already talked about this a little bit in your introduction, but in the past year, a high-profile homicide case was prosecuted in Tellor County. The case involved multiple law enforcement and judicial jurisdictions. What's your experience working with multiple local, state, and federal jurisdictions? And what are some of the lessons learned?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have, I think, 22 law enforcement agencies in the 4th Judicial District that covers Tellor and El Paso counties. I have great working relationships with all of them. In fact, I'm on a high-profile case right now. I'm not going to talk about that case, except to say that all those agencies are involved in that case as well. The FBI, ATF, we have outside of the state agencies, we have the Sheriff's Office, CSPD, and it's important. The biggest lesson I've learned is that you've got to collaborate. You've got to let the experts do the work they do, and then I've got to be the one that stands at the front of that and prosecute the case. That's the biggest thing that I've learned. You also have to trust them and let them do the work that they're trained to do. You know, they're the ones with the boots on the ground out in the fields looking for evidence and that kind of thing. So,
absolutely. Mr. Waller?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's about building trusting relationships with the law enforcement agencies that you work with. That's why I have the support endorsement of our sheriff in El Paso County, Bill Elder, and that organization. In fact, former police chief Pete Carey from the Colorado Springs Police Department also supporting me and endorsing me in this race as well. But I think what it comes down to, again, is having those trusting relationships and having those law enforcement officials know that they can do their job, and then having them understand and know that you know how to do your job when the time comes for you to do that. I have worked with law enforcement agencies across the state. I've been on the Colorado Springs Police Foundation, been a part of the Criminal Justice Commission in the state of Colorado, been on the Sex Offender Management Board, and I've tried to be a sponge in each of those areas that I've been to try to soak up and learn as much about the criminal justice system as I can understand. So when I become the district attorney, I'm ready to do my job on the first day in office.
Thank you. We're now going to go to Mr. Stone as soon as Deb. What do they call those? Grip boys? Yeah, you're the grip boy. All right. All right. The next question for our county commissioner candidates. Recognizing that there's going to be a potential for reduced property values in 2020 and the future need for surplus funds, how would you prioritize and plan for the future economic needs of Tellor County?
Yeah, and actually I think it's highly likely that we will not only see a reduced budget due to, well, and actually property values, I think that still has to play out. The market still needs to decide that. But the reality is that 40% of our county budget comes from both state and federal sources. And that's why it's really important that our commissioners be plugged in at the state level so that we can be there to effectively, essentially lobby to make sure that we get the funds that we need in order to run the critical services of the county. Big focus is obviously Road and Bridge Department, and with the ongoing pandemic, the county health department, to make sure that they're properly funded and that we have the assistance from the state that we need in order to provide adequate testing moving forward, especially as we move into fall. Now, these are all this year type things, but this is, as we know, this is likely not going to end soon. But, then from there, again, the Road and Bridge Department is going to be extremely important because that's literally where the rubber meets the road. That's the one area where people come into contact with their government the most.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Mr. Williams.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the question. So this week, twice, the Joint Finance Committee at the state level is meeting to try and slash our budget for the state of Colorado by $3.3 billion. That's with a B dollars. I can tell you that's going to impact DHS, which also protects our vulnerable populations, our senior citizens, and some of the other folks and our children. And we've got a contingency fund, over $2 million, that thanks to some great county commissioners and their conservative practices, took us 12 years to do that. And so we've got a bill right now, I think by today's count, $462,000 $100,000 for the COVID epidemic. We're hoping to get it back, along with 3,000 other counties are hoping to get money back. And so, as Mr. Stone said, there's a little uncertainty out there, but I'm sure with sound principles and solid engagement with our higher offices at the state level, we'll be okay. But we're going to have to make some hard choices, and I'm ready to make those with the input of the people.
Mr. Mella, same question.
Thank you. The state budget is going to have to be cut. It will impact us. The state budget is $32 billion. The discretionary percentage of that is $12.4 billion. We're looking at a $3.3 billion cut. That's 25%. So we are going to be feeling some pain. However, I recently met with an official from the county who will remain nameless and reviewed our current standing financially now and into next year for the budget. I am told we're on sound financial footing because, as Mr. Williams said, of the conservative stewardship of the current commissioners and the previous. So what I would do is maintain the fiscal conservative principles that I embedded in this, on this dais for 7 years, fighting for tougher budgets, wringing out efficiencies, and making sure the taxpayer money is well put to use, and if it's not necessary, to eliminate it or to lobby to eliminate it. Thank you.
And Mr. Rusterhotlz.
We do face uncertain time. We don't know what's going to happen with property valuation or what money will be coming into the county. You know, there's always two sides to the ledger, and as being a business owner of myself, always have to prepare and account for the worst scenario possible. I think that I agree with the other three commissioner candidates here. Our current county commissioners have done an excellent job of managing the money of the county, planning contingencies, and I think that I would hold exactly to my same conservative financial principles, that we prepare to tighten our belts wherever possible and look for every opportunity to save that money and proceed forward the way we are. And I think one of the vulnerable places we have to look at are our schools and our emergency resources here as well, that they're taking care of.
Thank you. Mr. Waller, we'll go to some candidate questions for our district attorney candidates. Can you describe the use of special courts in the 4th Judicial District, and what is your opinion of their effectiveness?
I think special courts are awesome. There's a special domestic violence court that we use in the 4th Judicial District. We have Veterans Court in the 4th Judicial District as well. That's one actually I participated in help creating through the legislative process way back in, I think it was 2009, 10, 11, somewhere in there, creating that special court. But I think those are necessary because, again, this is about making our communities safer. And special courts are designed to make sure that people get the treatment and the help they need in order to be successful and once again become productive members of society. They're not necessarily punitive. It's about making sure people are taken care of the way that they need to be so they can get back to that path to being a productive member. And I think that the more special courts we have, the better off we're going to be.
Thank you. Mr. Allen.
Same question.
Same question, please.
Great, thank you. So I think specialty courts are a fantastic supplement that we have in the 4th Judicial District. I think that it takes experience to know what kind of people are appropriate for the different specialty courts. I've been a line DA for the Veterans Trauma Court, and now I supervise the Veterans Trauma Court. So I'm very integrally involved in who gets into the Veterans Trauma Court and who doesn't. We do a fantastic job of getting those people that are appropriate for the program into treatment for PTSD, TBI, potentially addiction issues, and getting them turned around. I want to tell you quickly about a story of a sergeant from the Army that was an intel guy that was in Iraq, and his buddy was killed in the line of duty. He developed an addiction to alcohol and came back and committed an offense. He's been in the program and has been sober now for almost 2 years, and he'll graduate soon and will be back to serving in the military. That's what we do. That's how we can turn lives around in the 4th Judicial District, and that's what I do every single day.
Thank you, and thank you for that success story. We're now going to go back to our county commissioner candidates, and I believe I'm starting with Mr. Williams. And the question I have for you now is, Friction between elected officials and administrative departments and staff is inevitable. How would you deal with potential conflict between your office and that of another county department?
That's a great question. And because I've been a leader my whole life, it's not the first time I've heard that question. It's not the first time I've dealt with it. So whether you're a CEO, whether you're a county commissioner, whether you're a department head, a director, or frankly, city council and some of the things that happen here in Woodland Park or other incorporated cities, I encourage dissent. I want to hear opinions. Dissent or disagreement is not disrespect. In fact, it's the process. Let's be honest, somebody comes in an elected office and holds a position for 2 to 8 years, in the case in this county and the cities, doesn't have the experience that somebody with 30 years does. That said, once you leave that room and you've heard all the opinions, there's got to be a county position. There needs to be a city position. And our city, more importantly, and as importantly, our public needs to be part of that. But there needs to be a single voice once we've had that input. We need to stop the divisiveness.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay. You'll be up next, Mr. Mella. You ready? Bill.
Thank you. Your question gets at the heart of, in the commercial sector, what's called cultural corporate behavior, and the same applies in government. And both when I was a city councilman and in my professional career, I excelled at looking at ways to find conflict resolution, to get people to look at areas where they may be in error, and to look at ways to resolve those constructively without people giving up and becoming angry. The key is when people become angry and conflict rises, kind of the emotional barometric pressure increases and people become very defensive. And when you're defensive, if you think about your own lives, you're less likely to listen to other people. So I've done a lot of conflict resolution, getting folks to kind of be more comfortable with their positions. And in that case, what you can do is resolve the problem without either party feeling bad or that they've been compromised. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rusterhotlz.
You know, conflict with people is an inevitable thing. And one of the things people often say, and I felt like that myself, is that are they truly heard? They're listened to, but do you hear what they're saying? A lot of time people who are in positions of leadership, they have already formed an opinion in their mind before they've heard all of the evidence, all of both sides of the story. So what I bring to this is listening to people. I've spent my entire career listening, solving problems that come along with 2 different local companies and with our own company. And a lot of, so if we listen to people, they feel respected and come to an answer, a solution to the problem that makes each person feel like they have been respected and have value.
Thank you. Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Ms. Harvey. I think it's really important to answer this question that everybody understands what the proper role of the county commissioners are. The county commissioners do not resolve issues between department heads because the county commissioners have 2 employees. They employ the county administrator and the county attorney. The county administrator is the one who works between the department heads. And if a commission were to insert themselves into a difference between those department heads, it would lead to a breakdown of the organizational structure of the county. Now, the most likely area of conflict that commissioners will enter into is because counties are unique because of the elected officials that are in charge of a lot of the departments. The likely conflicts are going to be between commissioners who set budgets and the elected officials who then manage those budgets. Now, I have personal relationships with every elected official in this county, and I have great confidence that we'll be able to resolve any of those differences, not only because we know each other, but we respect each other. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. Okay, we're going to go back over to our district attorney candidates, and we'll start with Mr. Allen. And the question I have for you, obviously the district attorney's staff is, or your office has a large staff. What's your experience managing a large staff of professionals and non-professional employees?
Sure. So I currently supervise a team of attorneys in the DA's office. That number can fluctuate anywhere between 5 to 7 attorneys at any one time. over time as a supervisor, I've supervised over 25 attorneys in the office. And I can tell you, supervising attorneys is worse than trying to herd cats. I also consider myself to be a leader or supervisor when I'm on a big investigation. So when I talked earlier about being on a big case, I'm really on the front of what that case is doing as far as making big decisions on a case. Search and seizure issues are coming to me, and I'm making calls on, you need to put this information in or take this information out. You always need to make sure that there's mitigating information in warrants, that kind of thing. Make sure the law enforcement personnel who don't necessarily keep up with the law as much as we do, that they're following the law, that they're protecting people's constitutional rights. That's how I have developed my leadership skills in the district attorney's office. Big investigations and leading actual attorneys and support staff in the office.
Thank you. And now Mr. Waller, same question.
Thank you. I've made a career out of developing leadership skills and being an effective leader in whatever job it has been that I've done. You know, I'm currently the head of a 2,850 member organization right now. Tremendous amount of leadership skills necessary to be able to manage all of that. I'm the chair of the board of county commissioners, so I have to engage in peer leadership right now with my other 4 colleagues on the county commission. We have 5 in El Paso County as opposed to 3 here. So you have to engage in peer leadership there. I think leadership also means being able to understand the stressors that are associated with what the folks that work for you have to deal with. That means being able to manage their budgets, being able to manage all of the things that come along with being in a large organization like this. I think that's crucially important. I've also managed a team of attorneys. Haven't done it here in El Paso County or Tellor County, but I did it in Baghdad, Iraq.
Thank you. Sometimes this is a little obnoxious, but you have to watch her. Just let you know.
3 seconds over, right?
That's right. And I also want to let you know that we've got 52 participants in Zoom land at this time. And
Fantastic.
if anyone here in the room would like to submit a question to follow up after we have a question from our representative from the press, you need to pass those to Mr. Jim Olson. Jim's back in the corner here. And then Deb and I will vet those. Let's go back to our county commissioners, and we do start with Mr. Mella at this time. I'm not always certain this number is correct, but I'm going to use it as an approximate. 24% of the adults in Tellor County are veterans, military veterans. What experience do you have that helps you understand the needs of these citizens? And as a commissioner, what do you plan on doing to support our vets?
I've spoken at length with Commissioner Steen about his role because he obviously is a retired brigadier general. And I've tried to learn his efforts and how exactly he has approached this issue. It's vastly complicated. I did not wear the uniform, so it would be a learning curve, I'll be candid. But my goal, as always, is to step into a role and maintain that which is successful. And I know he has made strong inroads to help folks, and I would pick up that baton and carry it and develop the programs and assistance that he has created, because I know he's done a tremendous amount. Again, my heart goes out to those who have served. Mr. Williams, deeply, deeply grateful. Others in this room who have, Mr. McKim. So my heart's in it, and I am committed to doing the absolute best I can on their behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Mella. Mr. Rusterhotlz.
I have never served in the armed forces. My father, my uncle, my numerous relatives have. One of my best friends here tonight is Mr. McKim and numerous other military people who are supporting me in this race. And they've told me about the different programs that are available. And like Mr. Mella said, this is a well-run county in regard to taking care of its veterans. I would also continue with that same plans, those plans that are in place for the different services, and make sure our veterans are taken care of. They are a valuable part of our community. I suspect with the growth that's going to go on in Colorado Springs, this will continue to be a retirement community, so to speak, of our retired veterans. So that is a very important part. We'll keep the ship steady and continue with the successful programs that we already have in place.
Thank you. Mr. Stone?
Thank you, Ms. Harvey. When I first announced that I was running for council, I sat down with the county administrator and I asked the question, for our veteran services, are our veteran services available for our veterans at the times when they need them? Are we servicing our veterans to the level that we should be? The answer I actually got was no. And the reason it's no is because we currently have a part-time person in our Veteran Services office. So I sat down with Mr. Williams, who's a local VFW post commander, talked about the situation with veterans there. And I also talked with Stan Vanderwerf, who's a county commissioner in Colorado Springs, about the services that they provide and how they provide it, to explore ways that perhaps El Paso County and Tellor County might be able to cooperatively ensure that the services are there. I don't ever want to see a veteran walk up to the Veteran Services office here in Woodland Park and pull on that door and have it locked.
As a veteran, I have no idea where that office may be, but
It's at 8th Research Parkway.
thanks. Mr. Williams?
Yes, ma'am. And I am a veteran, and thank you for all of your kind comments. And so really, it's a twofold approach. I command the American Legion here at Woodland Park. I'm in the VFW. I sit on the 5th Congressional District Service Academy Nomination Board, where we pick the next generation of officers, and I run the Veterans Trust Fund along with some great people. We go to those funerals. We had a veteran die. Some of you know, he's got a law enforcement background. Just this week, we reach out to the families. Erik's exactly right. We need to go to a full-time veteran service officer. There are nearly 500,000 veterans living on the Front Range I-25 corridor. And as some of the other counties have said, they're moving up here. After 20 years of war in Afghanistan and almost the same in Iraq, it's a special group of people. I like to say they're no more special than all the special people in Tellor County, but they have some special needs. We've got some hoarders out there. We've got folks with TBI. As a district attorney candidate said, we don't have those same programs that El Paso County has. And giving me another online program is not going to work in most of the county that doesn't have broadband. And so I'll take that charge. I'm experienced and I'm ready to do that for our veterans. And they are a vulnerable population in many cases and aging. Our veterans from Vietnam are 75 and older, so we'll take care of them.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We'll begin with Mr. Waller on our next question for our district attorney candidates. Do you think that there are issues of racial discrimination and bias in the prosecution of criminal cases in Colorado? And if there is, describe that problem and what would you do to combat them?
No, I don't think that we have that issue in El Paso County, certainly or in the 4th Judicial District. I think that people are treated fairly, that's for sure. There's probably an inherent bias in race in America today, and I think that those problems are showing themselves as things boil over, but I think that we do it correctly in Colorado, that's for sure. We've heard, for example, in the death penalty cases that's biased racially. But again, I think in Colorado, we've done that right. The last guy that was actually put to death in the state of Colorado was a white person. 3 guys on death row, they are African-American, well, no longer on death row. The governors commuted those sentences, but they're there for killing other African-Americans and certainly deserve to be there. They should be there. And I think that it's a travesty that Nathan Dunlap wasn't put to death by Governor Hickenlooper several years ago. So I don't think we have that issue here.
Mr. Allen?
Thank you. So, when we prosecute cases, I have never looked at the person's skin color to determine what's going to happen with the case. And I don't know of a single prosecutor that's ever done that. That being said, I think that we should listen to the voices of minorities in our community to make sure that they are being heard, to make sure that they do feel like they're part of the program and that we are having just outcomes. I absolutely believe that criminal prosecution, the victims of defendants usually are people that are close to those people. So typically it's going to be somebody in their neighborhood or somebody in their family that's the victim. And so oftentimes it is going to be somebody that is of similar race background as the defendant. And so I think we forget about that a lot of times when we focus on just the defendants. Let's look at the victims. How are they being treated in the criminal justice system? That's what I think is important in this discussion, is looking at the victims, making sure that they are getting the service they need from the prosecutors.
Thank you. Very thoughtful answers. You ready now? We're going to go to David. I'm thinking that I may even give you a 2-minute response for this one. So I'm gonna go with 2 minutes on it. Because I'm going to ask you to share the top 3 things you'll do if elected to promote economic development in Tellor County. And what do you see as the primary challenge to achieving those goals?
The top 3 things for economic development. Well, I would go back to the foundational principles of the proper role of government. And that is to protect the person's rights, to stand out of the way, to protect those free property rights, and allow the free market to set the course for that with an intelligent design guiding it. So that intelligent design, I would say, are the business owners and their hopes and dreams for Tellor County. Some of the obstacles that are facing us right now would be a Wi-Fi, not a Wi-Fi system, but a broadband system, so that we have internet across the county. I would like to remove any obstacles that government can possibly have in place to be able to put up towers and internet service and cables and things what is necessary for the demands of the people of the county. I don't think it's government's responsibility to put that in, but to remove any roadblocks for that. A lot of people, this is a very desirable place to come and live. It's away from the city, yet close to Colorado Springs and all the amenities of it. So I would like to also work with builders and planners to make it easier to build homes here, more attainable homes. That would be one of the things that I find that I hear continually. Businesses run into roadblocks all the time with differing kinds of problems, with having permission to do things on certain kinds of property here and there. I'm not suggesting that every business is a batch plant like that has been proposed around the county, but there are many, many businesses that could go in, gift stores and mom and pop things. So I would remove any obstacle possible.
Thank you. Mr. Stone, same question.
Thank you. First off, I think you have to ask, what's the proper role of government in regards to economic development? Quite frankly, government's not very good at business. The biggest thing that we need to do as a government, number one, is to make sure that we stay very small with very easy to navigate land use regulations, so the companies who want to establish within Tellor County can do that very easily. But then we also need to make sure we're partnering with the communities to make sure that, what the master plan for Woodland Park is, or for Cripple Creek is, or in Victor, that those are in sync with the growth management plan that that Mr. Williams has been working on for a long time for the county. Because following the growth management plan is a public process to ensure that the type of growth we're getting is the type of growth that the community indicated that it wants. Number two is we really have to look at our gaming industry and how we can help on the state level to get them open again, and to open up all of those businesses so we can get those construction projects back online, so that we can get those hotels open. Because tourism, when we don't have a lot of room to grow because of the size limitations of our county, is that promoting growth within the businesses that are already here is going to be critical in doing that. And tourism is one of the things that feeds that, because then we don't need places to put people, we just need places to temporarily put people.
Mr. Williams?
I'll pick up on Erik's theme. So here's the reality: before we can work on development, we got to work on recovery. We can't skip that phase. And government does need to be put back in its place, as Erik said, but government had to get involved this time because of COVID. So we've had some artificiality. So the first thing we need to do is get out of the environment we're in now. We've got to look at the CARES Act. The CARES Act is really complicated. It's helping some folks, but again, in a county, this isn't a criticism, this is a reality. In a county where most of us are rural, we don't have broadband. We've got an older population that may not be comfortable navigating all the forms. So we've got to, that's probably what government could do, is try to help some of our vulnerable population figure that out, work with our businesses. So first is recovery. Then the proper role of government, I am working with our county commissioners on the growth management plan, is development pays its own way. So what controls development? Let's say the town of Divide or the community of Divide, it's our wastewater treatment plant. Government's not going to put that in there. We're going to have to work with our developers and bond issues and try to figure that out. That's been on the books for probably 25 years, but that's an example. City of Woodland Park, there are about 10 shuttered businesses within half a mile of where we're sitting now. Again, not a criticism, reality. And we've got some businesses that are struggling to stand up right now. So we've got to really take a hard look at small business loans. We've got to probably have a forum hosted by our cities, you know, with participation of the county to see who needs help. Walmart doesn't need help right now. The big box stores did pretty well. Maybe there's some burden sharing. Good example is the mine. Our mine did a great job. Gave over $500,000 to folks. They're distributing PPE to our casinos right now, personal protection equipment, so that when they stand up, they don't have to purchase that. So there's a lot of partnerships we can do. And again, but I agree with Erik Stone in that there is a proper role of government. This is extraordinary with the pandemic. None of us in this room lived through the last one. And so we've got to get them on their feet, and then we've got to get them moving, and we're ready to do that.
And now, Mr. Mella.
Thank you. I hate to be the amen choir, but being a conservative, you do have to look at the proper role of government. I think it's minimal in this respect. I think that's the virtue of conservative governance, is that you stay out of the way and you understand your role. That being said, I have read the draft growth management plan, very ably written by Mr. Williams. And in that plan, it talks about industrial development, which I found intriguing. And the part that was intriguing is that in 2002, the Tellor County Heavy Industrial Services Action Plan had a certain expectation of growth in the plan. And yet when it was measured against 18 years later, it's essentially the same in 2019. And they talk about why, and the reasons are people don't want a lot of heavy industrial around because of the pollution, the noise, the sounds, the dust. So the challenge will be to A, respect the proper role of government, streamline regulatory environments so that willing businesses are not burdened out of the chute, because that's one of the complaints I do hear, is that things are a little more burdensome and bureaucratic than they need to be. So we should be an enabler, not an obstacle to business development, even the industrial types, to examine, because those would be heavy hitters in terms of tax revenue. We should be friendly, we should be respectful, and look at every opportunity to partner with the cities within our region. And if I guess I still have more time. So we look at the growth in areas. The growth nodes are in the unincorporated cities, and those would be Divide and Florissant. So I would examine those in particular to see if there's anything that can be done in that environment to encourage larger industrial growth, if it's possible, don't know. And also just be friendly to retail that wants to come to those cities, because those are ripe for proper development. Thank you.
Mr. Williams, I'm going to give you 30 seconds if you'd like to respond about the point that Mr. Mella made with the plan.
No, it's great, and I didn't take it as a criticism. He's right. The Heavy Services Action Plan basically took a look throughout Tellor County, including Woodland Park, when we were all a little closer with the planning department to that, and said, hey, wouldn't this be a great place? So a good example is the batch plant that's down here. But other than the mine, none of that's happened. There's actually only 2 areas in Tellor County unincorporated that are zoned for manufacturing or heavy zoning, and they're actually south of Victor, and they're full of cows right now. And so part of it is it's a lot cheaper for industry to stay down the hill, 730,000 folks down there. Transportation costs are cheaper, and frankly, we don't have a lot of land left to develop here. When you look at what we've got left, half of our property is not for sale. It's BLM, National Forest, and state land, and we have almost 300 subdivisions. So we've got to really take a hard look, and I think it's the will of the people, and that's who we'll listen to.
Thank you. Okay, now for our district attorney candidates, I'm going to start, I think, now with Mr. Allen. This is a generic question because I was very careful not to choose questions that might lead to a potential case or a potential event. So if you want to elaborate on this beyond the question, I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes for this one. As a district attorney, how would you handle a fatal use of force incident involving local police?
So I've actually been involved in officer-involved shooting investigations on several occasions in my career as a prosecutor, all of them here in the 4th Judicial District. I can tell you from that experience that investigating officer-involved shooting cases are by far the most difficult cases to investigate. They have more intricacies involved. There are different statutes that are involved as far as that give officers the justification to use force if somebody's using force against them. You have to think about, how is the outcome of this investigation going to impact our community? How is it going to impact our relationship with our law enforcement agency that officer works for? So those are very delicate situations. I think that we can do a better job on these investigations, frankly. We are hearing now that people are demanding that we get body-worn camera out to the people in a much faster way. There's a new bill that was proposed, I think, yesterday up in the state legislature that would require body-worn camera being turned over to the people within 7 days of a shoot. That's awfully fast, and it's awfully a lot faster than what happens currently. But I think that we have to take into consideration, what is the impact on our community? Do we want the community to have trust in these investigations? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. And so we have to be as transparent as we possibly can, as early as we possibly can. Sometimes we're not going to be quick enough, unfortunately. So I would just tell you, as an experienced prosecutor that has been involved in those cases, they are very, very tough cases. I've seen cases where I'm friends with the officer and they've been involved in a shoot. It is tough emotionally on the officer. Nobody wants to go out and kill somebody. No officer that I know of wants to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Waller?
Thank you. Yeah, these are obviously very difficult circumstances and situations, but again, you have to have that trust between the law enforcement agency and the district attorney's office in order to be able to effectively deal with the cases. And then alternatively, you end up having to have trust with the community, which means being transparent in the process, getting the information out as quickly as possible, but I think also being willing to make the decision as the district attorney to decide whether or not you need to prosecute this officer in this officer-involved shooting or whether you shouldn't. I believe that is the role and responsibility of the elected official in the office, to make those determinations. I don't think those kinds of cases should go to grand juries. I think the DA, the buck should stop with the DA, and the DA should be the one willing to make that determination, even when it's not politically expedient to do that. Politics should never be a part of determining whether or not you're going to prosecute a law enforcement official, or alternatively not prosecute a law enforcement official that gets into one of these circumstances and situations. But again, it has to be that responsibility of the elected official themselves. It can't be foisted off onto some other agency in order to do that. And I think that's the best way we can handle these cases and situations moving forward. And I think it's certainly the best way to build trust in the public as well.
Thank you.
Would it be okay to respond to that a little bit?
I'll give you each of you 30 seconds.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think this blanket idea that the DA should always make the determination on an officer-involved shooting ignores the reality of these cases. These cases, as I've said, are the most difficult cases that we are involved in investigating. And I should point out that the grand jury, which is by statute a way that we can take cases and get to a filing decision, is sometimes the best way, because that means that members of the community are making the decision about whether somebody should be charged or not. That's transparency, and that's getting it out to the people to let them decide, is this something that they want occurring in their community or not? And they get to make the decision and then send us a true bill or not.
Mr. Waller?
Yeah, I think it's a leadership issue. I really do. And I think you have to, as the elected official, be willing to make the tough decisions. And that's what, as Mr. Allen has said, these are very tough decisions that you have to make. And I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's appropriate to foist these off onto other individuals when it's your responsibility to be making the decision.
Thank you. At this time, that concludes my prepared questions. I have a follow-up, though, that I would like to go to the county commissioner candidates with, and that's about broadband. I've heard it come up a couple of times. So I want to hear what you think the commissioner's role would be with regard to broadband in Tellor County. And I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Phil. Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Broadband is a tough issue, I think, and it's indicative of the fact that it points back to what is your political philosophy. And again, I have met extensively with Commissioner Steen because he's carried this torch and he's done extensive work, but he always emphasized that it is largely as a facilitator and a mover and trying to get parties to work together, and that it's not the role of government, and I completely concur, to expend funds. This is a private entity that must be encouraged and facilitated to make these initiatives. I think it's critical. I think it's important. You can get back into the electrification laws back in the 30s in the country, and those are indicative of the same thing. Government had obviously a bigger role at that time, but from my philosophical perspective, being a facilitator of those relationships to augment and increase the chances of expanding broadband in the community is vital. Thank you.
Mr. Rusterhotlz.
The role of government in this is the same as what we talked about before. It is to make it remove any reasonable obstacle that we can. There's wonderful technology out there. I've talked to Dan, who owns Tellor County Wi-Fi, and he said there's so many things that they can do. It is primarily, there's some of the restrictions that make it difficult for putting up towers, the height of towers to service different areas. You know, the people of the county want internet service. They want the best it can possibly be. It's one of the reasons that numerous businesses don't come here to Tellor County or out into the western parts of the county or south of Cripple Creek and Victor. There's technology out there. There's restrictions, regulations that are in the way that can be removed. I want to facilitate that in that way. Get out of the way, find a way to say yes, and let the free market do its job.
Thank you. Mr. Stone?
Yeah, I think actually, Mr. Mella has it exactly right. And then it's a question of the proper role of government, which is, does the government, provide you with your propane? Do they provide you with natural gas? Do they provide you with phone service? No, they don't provide you with any of those. And that's because when people move to a remote area of the county, they understand that there will be limited services. They understand they may not have natural gas and they may have to put in propane. They understand they may have to spend a significant amount of money to bring electricity to the property. It's not the role of government to do that. The thing that's exciting, though, is the entrepreneurs that are in Tellor County that are building out these networks. Peak Internet is one of the leading internet supply broadband, fiber companies out there. I know I was super excited when I was able to tap into fiber at my house, and they're just constantly expanding that network. So, this is a role of the private sector. And now, as I will make one comment though on that. Mr. Rusterhotlz talked about on towers. There's a reason we have tower restrictions in the county, and it's because of our property rights that we want to respect. And I have a stop sign, so.
Thank you, though. And Mr.
Yeah, I got a lot of
Williams?
experience with this, and so I agree with all three of the candidates in terms of the role of government. But let's focus this down. The FCC has given very clear guidance to local jurisdictions that we are to get in the way. That said, local jurisdiction property rights, as Erik said, do matter. We've got two 70-foot Christmas trees along 24 that right now we're being looked at to expand another 20 feet. And why is that? Because one of the subscribers would like to be on top of another subscriber. So it's complicated. You've got folks with view sheds, $300,000 to $700,000 homes that don't want to look at another tower. And as Mr. Rusterhotlz said, we do have some technologies that exceed tower capabilities. And so we look at that. We do have a very streamlined process. It's less than 7 days for administrative review. But if you want to put a 90-foot tower in front of Mick Bates's house, Mick Bates has probably got an opinion about that. And so we're going to have, and there is a process for it. It uses our planning commissions and our councils and what the people want. So there is a balance. And as Erik finally said, those of us from remote areas probably live there for a reason as well. So it's a balance.
Thank you. I'm now going to allow our press representative to ask a question. Did you want to ask a question of each candidate for both county commission and district attorney? How do you want to do that?
Yeah, if I could just ask one question for the commissioners and one question for the.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little tricky. And if you could start with Mr. Stone, and then Mr. Williams, Mr. Mella, and then Mr. Rusterhotlz, and then with our DA candidates, if you would please start with Mr. Waller.
Okay. This first question kind of has three parts to it, but they're kind of all interrelated. So I was just wondering, what is your stand on reopening Tellor County? Do you think that the current health codes and restrictions have been too strict? And how much do you think the county should be involved when it comes to dealing with issues that come down from the state level?
Okay, I got two questions in there. I'm sorry. I got what's my stand on reopening, and then
The health code's too strict,
okay,
and then the county involvement in state issues.
And Eric, you have 2 minutes.
okay. Give me
Each of you will have 2
give me
minutes.
10 seconds to write down. And okay, so my stand on reopening in Tellor County, number one is the powers that were granted to the governor as soon as it was realized that the coronavirus pandemic was not going to be as great a tragedy as they predicted. I believe that the local health board, our county commissioner serving as our board of health, should have been given the responsibility to deal with the pandemic. And Phil's exactly right when he says that we need to find ways to limit in the future to ensure that this, unadulterated power, this unchecked power of the government, of the governor, is not allowed to continue and continue and continue as he continues to extend this. As for the local health codes, I mean, every time our Board of Health has wanted to come out with recommendations, the governor has come in with a mandate. And our Board of Health has done a great job because, you know what, I'm like them. I trust the people of Tellor County. When we explain the situation to them, whether it's in regards to the pandemic or in regards to any other health threat, I fully expect them to take care of each other because it's what we've always done here in Tellor County. Now, as for what we can do on the state level for this, actually this coalition that I've worked to put together, the Colorado Commissioners Freedom Coalition, banding together, standing alone against the state is very difficult. Standing together against state mandates is a much stronger position to be in.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I'll just say that unlike a wildland fire, the risk to the leadership of the cities, of the county, was the same as the risk to the folks that were behind locked doors. And that's not a criticism, it's reality. So nobody really knew what we were dealing with. And it's important to remember Monday morning quarterback is tough. That said, we need to open now. And I agree with Eric. I trust the people. I trust our business owners. There's masks distributed. They know the procedures. We've got marks on every store on the floor. So we need to open now. And I've been privileged to work with our commissioners and our first responders to actually write and help craft a lot of those documents. And so it's unacceptable to me that when we craft a variance, when we're allowed to, when we aren't giving test kits, but asked to give 2 weeks of responses, without that, it's unacceptable. We have to wait nearly 3 weeks from a response for the state because they're busy. That's not acceptable. We asked for our casinos to open. We didn't answer within 24 hours. I don't understand with the technology that we have, but we can't get an email back. And I do know a lot of our business owners. I've talked to them. I think they'll be responsible. The good news is I think you'll see us begin to open up shortly. Our restaurants, our casinos, and even those bars that are associated with those restaurants. It's time. We need to be cautious. I can tell you I've talked to several mayors who want business, but they've also looked over their shoulder and said, you still got the mask, you still got the surge hospital, we're going to be okay, because we really don't know what will happen when the buses start coming back up here. But I think we can manage it. The sky isn't falling. And the way we approach this, and Eric said it before, will be the same way we approach a fire. God forbid we have that, because, by the way, that's still hanging over our heads for another couple of months. So I trust the people. It's time to open.
Mr. Mella?
Thank you. With respect to reopening, and again, I really believe that Mr. Williams has a very valid point that, and I wrote a letter to the editor to this point, received some criticism from folks, but it's easier to kind of play the armchair epidemiologist and say, well, the masks are important, they're not important. And you can find research to support both. The same with social distancing. It's 6 foot in America. Guess what? It's 4.2 feet in Europe. So which is right? Well, you can scratch your head, and that's one of the problems. But with respect to reopening, New York City did do one thing right. And when they began to reopen, they used a kind of an algorithm for hospital bed capacity, and they monitored it very, very closely. And when that capacity began tamping down, they began putting stronger restrictions on people. So they kind of titrated the amount of oversight, which kind of frankly surprised me concerning de Blasio's horrible performance with respect to the riots. So the health codes, are they too strict? Part of the problem is much of the health code was kind of passed down from the State Department. And to me, I think with the notion of federalism, locally determined codes and regulations are closest to the people, not unlike a school board. We don't want the state telling the schools how to run themselves. The same should be the case with respect to healthcare codes. And so it's county specific. That was the biggest faux pas. We've determined that now that about 8 or 9 counties have the preponderance of cases and deaths. Not unlike the fact that if you add New York and New Jersey together, it's about 43 or 44% of the cases and deaths. And so what you want is a more deft approach, a less draconian approach. The governor could have done this. My sense is that, and not to castigate Democrats, because he did do many things right, I believe. But I think the instinct for many on the left is a little more heavy-handed, and I'm trying to be charitable. Thank you.
Mr. Rusterhotlz.
Yes, this has been a big topic for me for the past 3 months. And it was surprising that how frequently it came up. What, once again, is the proper role of government in something like this? What we got was certainly not what a lot of people expected. It was treated as though we were at war and there were no bullets flying. It didn't surprise me what our governor did. Maybe it did. It surprised me that he wasn't more restrictive, maybe closer to what happened in New York City or in California. What I saw was I had to ask myself at the very beginning of this, what is the proper role of government? It's to defend our rights. That trumps everything. If we don't have our rights, what good is safety? I thought that this should have been responded to as an information and not a one-size-fits-all remedy to a nationwide problem. As soon as we started seeing that population centers were most highly affected and that the people started seeing that it was the older people that had the highest mortality rate, and that the younger people had absolutely, were recovering sometimes without symptoms, I thought that it was handled, it was just handled in a very poor way. Our obligation, our responsibility as elected servants to the people of this country and to this county in specific is to defend their rights. We have a duty to accurately inform them of risk, advise on what they could possibly do, but I think do that through health, like for instance, the hospital. But to do what they did, it needed to be approached on 2 different ways, because we had a legal system that we had to take care of, but a communication system that says, we don't agree with it, with what the governor is doing. We want to help you in the situation you're at. And that's the end of my time. I could go on and on.
Thank you, Trevor. That was a great question. Now you have a question for Mr. Waller and Mr. Allen.
Yes,
Mr. Waller will go first.
okay. So I'm just curious, what is your thoughts on legalizing retail marijuana in Tellor County? And based on your experience, does legal retail marijuana lead to the increase of other crimes?
2 minutes.
Thank you. Teller County voters can do what Teller County wants to do. I would not be a fan of legalizing marijuana in Teller County. I've certainly not been a fan of legalizing marijuana in El Paso County, because here's what happens. Drug lords and cartels have figured out that it's easier to grow marijuana here in the United States and then illegally ship it across our borders to other areas of the country than it is to sneak it across a border somewhere. That's created situations where now that we're trafficking marijuana, when we traffic in marijuana, we end up trafficking in other things as well. That includes illegal narcotics, illegal weapons, and in the worst cases, human beings. Until this gets figured out at the federal level, I would not at all support any kind of legalization in El Paso or Teller County. We've just seen too many devastating impacts of this in our communities, and we certainly don't need more drug lords and cartels here in our communities.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you. I think that the people in each jurisdiction should get to decide whether they have retail marijuana or not. I can tell you that I'm absolutely against legalization of marijuana, but I can also tell you that it is here to stay. We're not getting rid of marijuana. It's part of our Constitution now, thanks to the initiative a few years ago. I have been personally involved in prosecuting marijuana grows that have been conducted by cartels, especially here in Tellor County. What we saw in those grow operations is that they would bring shifts in from Cuba to Tellor County to man the grow, and then they would stay here for a little while, and then they'd ship them back and bring in the next crew. When we busted those crews here in Tellor County, we actually caught them in the middle of a shift change. So we had one crew leaving to the airport at DIA and another crew coming in to take over. Those people were victims of human trafficking. They weren't the ones that were reaping the benefits of legalized marijuana or these cartel grow operations. We also see that large-scale exportation of marijuana to other states is absolutely a fact. Our marijuana is now stronger than it has ever been as a result of the scientific refinement that has gone on after we legalized. And so cartels will ship marijuana to other states and then ship very dangerous drugs back. Drugs that the legislature has now decided to make a misdemeanor. Drugs like fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is being brought back into our state as a result of legalized marijuana and these cartel grows, and it is deadly. 4 grams or less is a misdemeanor now, and it's absolutely wrong. 4 grams of fentanyl is equal to about 120 to 160 hits. That is a deadly amount for everybody in this room, and that's a misdemeanor thanks to our legislature. I'm absolutely against legalizing marijuana and also these other drugs, dropping them and decriminalizing them.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. We're going to attempt, thanks, Trevor, those were good questions. We're going to try to attempt to bring up Pat Hill from the Pikes Peak Courier View. Pat, can you hear us? No, I'm muted. I can't ask for anything. While we're, now we have her.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Pat,
Yeah, I'm on?
You are on.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, at the beginning, I wasn't sure how each of you felt about the pandemic, the seriousness of it. But I think you get it. But what if we have people coming up here? I'm just not sure that I'm convinced that you were convinced about the seriousness of the pandemic in Tellor County, which I realize we have low cases, but we also have people coming up here, and we also have our health department against the variants, speaking against the variants. So.
What's the question?
Yeah.
What's the question? I'm sorry.
Oh.
Just wants our opinion.
Yeah, it sounds like you do. Do you agree with the health department
Hey,
being
I'll
against the
take it on if
variant?
you want to. Hey, Pat, I think I understand your question. So I think we're all concerned about our citizens. We lost 2. I will tell you that due to UV, due to dispersed living up here, due to high altitude, due to, frankly, a lot of hard work from our citizens who actually listened and hunkered down for a couple of weeks, and some great first responders, I think we, like the Passover, we were spared. There is a concern. You know, I've talked to the mayors in all the cities and the councils, and they are concerned what happens if, and that's what you may not have heard earlier. We do now have PPE. When this started, our first responders rushed in, for example, the first death, and they were wearing rain jackets. We didn't have any. The state didn't give us anything. The feds didn't give anything. I don't mind telling you that. So we have those supplies now. We were supposed to, at the time, take first responders and isolate them for their families for 14 days, and we did that. So there is a capability here now. We take it very seriously. The real issue is how long do we maintain that? And we don't know. We won't know till the fall. We are watching the West, who had it first, the East, who's had the most tragedy, and Colorado has its own model. So we'll just make that decision. But I think each and every one of us up here takes it seriously, but at the same time, we take the livelihood of our businesses and the freedoms that we've all earned as well. So it's a balance, Pat.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to pass that over to Mr. Mella now.
Sure, thank you. Obviously, when states began to reopen based on the discretion of the governor and also at the county level, there was panic. There was real concern about what might happen. Again, as Mr. Williams correctly stated, the uncertainty, the what ifs, because just a real brief indulgence. One of my friends from college is a physician. He studied neurophysiology for 40 years. He understands RNA viruses. He said there is something peculiar about this creature, this virus we have. It's a little different, and they don't have a good understanding of it biophysiologically, how it processes. That's why the average length of stay in an ICU generally is 3.6 days. With this, it's up to 12 to 14 days. When you're intubated on a vent, it's usually about 6 days. It can be up to 18 or 20 days on this. And also, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal today that up to 60% of people lose their taste and sense of smell. Some of them, apparently, it appears to be permanent because it attacks the olfactory nerve. So the point is, it's very, very serious. I am concerned about just suddenly having people flock up here. But I think going back again to what Mr. Williams said, you monitor it and you make quick decisions. You pivot rapidly based on the severity and what you experience from a hospitalization and diagnostic perspective. So that's what you have to do. You have to be nimble, quick, but recognize there's something unusual about this virus. It's not simply seasonal flu. It has a greater potential for harm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rusterhotlz, please.
I too believe that this was a very serious virus that came through. You know, if you look back at the different times that we've had things like this happen across the United States, this isn't the first time. You know, I remember my mother, she talks still about 1952, when the polio virus killed 27% of the people that contracted it. At that time, they didn't know what caused it. They saw that mostly young people were getting it, the reverse of this, the elderly. But what did government do then? Government saw that they didn't close everything down. They didn't tell you to stay at home. They didn't pick winners and losers in businesses and say that the grocery stores and the big box stores had to shut or could stay open, and the historic Ute Inn had to close. They identified the people at risk, and communities chose to shut down swimming pools and playgrounds, to not have their children playing with other kids out there, and to help slow the spread of polio. We've seen it numerous times, as they've talked about, as we found out once again that I think that it was handled incorrectly. We needed to plan. I'm not suggesting in any way that we didn't need to plan for the what if. It's just that I think that this was far too heavy-handed from the government, that private industry, UC Healthcare, should have spearheaded this with the support of our local government. And but the number one thing that an elected servant is in charge of is to protect our rights. And I have never in my life seen rights violated like they were without one bullet being fired.
Thank you.
And Mr. Stone.
Yeah, thank you. First off, I do want to agree with Mr. Williams. Our county is now prepared as we open up and bring more people into the county and get our economy rolling again. There are risks in doing that, but with risks comes great preparation in order to handle that risk. And our county has done a fantastic job. Actually, if you were to ask the Adjutant General of Colorado who came and visited our facilities, Tellor County did the finest job in the state of Colorado in quickly standing up and preparing to deal with an outbreak of the coronavirus here in Tellor County. Now, there was a point in the question, though, about the county, the health director opposing the variants. Now, she has a different job description. Her job description is just the protection of public health. but the group that actually makes these decisions is the Board of Health. It's our commissioners. And they have to balance both the primary and the secondary health considerations, because the health considerations, Mr. Williams pointed it out also, we've already exceeded our suicide total from 2019 this year. If you look at the total deaths in the state of Colorado, we've had in March and April, we had 1,371 more deaths in those 2 months than we had the previous year, but only 500 of those are attributed to coronavirus. Now, we don't know what the additional ones are, but we certainly have to consider that it's a secondary problem dealing with people being at home, with alcoholism, with overdoses, with cannabis psychosis. You know what? One ward is actually very full in hospitals across the state. It's the mental health ward. We have to understand that's important. Now, last is at the Board of Health meeting yesterday, where they granted a variance for Camp Elam. The emergency room doctor that is a consultant for Camp Elam said that the risk of spreading this in public is actually quite low. The risk of spreading the virus occurs in the home. And that's where it's likely to spread the most. That's why you see it affect intergenerational and nursing homes in the greatest degree.
Thank you. Pat, can you hear me? This is Carol Harvey.
I can.
Do you have questions for our district attorney candidates?
I don't.
Thank you.
She's letting us off easy.
She is.
I like that.
Do we have any questions from the folks here in the room? Okay. I'd like now to go to our closings, 2-minute summary from each of you, and I'm going to start with our district attorney candidates. As soon as you started asking the questions about coronavirus, I got a tickle in my throat.
Got a bottle of water for you
Yeah,
here.
if we could start with Mr. Waller, an opportunity just to wrap up your comments tonight and what's going to happen going forward.
Sure, and I've had to suppress a sneeze or two up here as well, certainly as we've been talking about the coronavirus stuff. This job's about experience, and I've never shied away from the political experience, I think, that creates value for our district attorney's office moving forward. I think that experience is necessary to create policy that gives prosecutors the tools they need to be successful. I think that kind of experience is necessary to be able to help citizens protect their right to protect themselves. Again, we had some Republican DAs in this state that were duped into supporting red flag legislation, and that should never have happened. But here's where politics should never come into the district attorney's office. It should never be used for political gain in the judicial process or in the criminal justice system. And I've had some pretty significant experience with this in recent times. There's a convicted felon in Colorado Springs named Doug Bruce, recently filed a complaint against me with the district attorney's office. And he did that in collusion with Colorado Springs City Council person Jill Gabler. And he also did it in collusion with my opponent's campaign, in particular his campaign manager, Sarah Cutter. Politics should never, or the criminal justice system should never, ever, ever be used in these kinds of circumstances, in these situations where it's weaponized for political gain. And I'll promise you, when I'm the district attorney, that'll never happen.
Thank you, Mr. Waller. Mr. Allen?
Thank you. I think we have 20 people in the room, and I think you last said 52 faceless people online. So thank you all for 54. So thank you all for being a part of this tonight. Ms. Miller and Ms. Harvey, you did a fantastic job moderating. One thing I'm going to say is that when you start throwing around the words collusion, you sound like Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. Do you want to be in that company? Let's get real, okay? Evil never rests. And the best defense against those who choose to do evil in our community is professional prosecutors dedicated to holding them accountable. There are some that want to make this a political seat, a dangerous game. The safety of our families is not a political game. You, the voters, are the hiring committee. for the next top law enforcement officer in the 4th Judicial District, covering all of Tellor and El Paso County. Our community, our friends, our families, and our neighbors deserve a district attorney with real, relevant, and ongoing experience that can be verified. Ask questions of your candidates. Make sure they have the experience that you demand to be the next top law enforcement officer in the 4th Judicial District. The type of experience matters. I encourage you all to do your homework and select the person with the right kind of experience. When you do, you will see that I am the right person for this job. My name is Michael Allen. I am a prosecutor, not a politician. I would be honored to take the oath to serve as your next district attorney. Please visit my website, michaelallen4da.com, Michael Allen, ALLEN, the number 4da.com. Thank you again and have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Williams.
I'd also like to thank the Chamber and the city for hosting us this evening, those of you online. Folks, I believe that this is the most consequential election that Tellor County has seen in the last 20 years. Certainly with the economic recovery challenges, the pandemic, the challenges even before that, and the opportunities that we have to face. So you have 4 men in the arena and 2 of us will leave as county commissioners and 2 of us will go on to be great men. You've got 4 great choices. But I'd ask you to focus on our capabilities, our conduct during this campaign for the last year and a half, our character, our service, the experience that we bring. I've been your county planning official for 5.5 years. It's been a privilege. It is a privilege. I've worked with thousands of our residents to help you develop and realize your dreams. I've supported our county commissioners, both current and past, in developing a strategic plan that drives our budget. I've managed $800 million budgets. That's about 25 times what our budget is for Tellor County. I have served my country. The principles of freedom and liberty aren't bumper stickers to me or posters. I fought for them. The flag is something not to be denigrated, it's something to be respected. I'm ready for this challenge. I know our city councils, I know our mayors, I know our business leaders, I know our faith-based organizers and our ministers. I know our law enforcement officials. In fact, I've been endorsed by all of them. This is going to be tough. We've got a hard road ahead. It's going to be okay, but don't fool yourselves. The other thing that we've talked about here tonight is going to require bold leadership, and I've been a leader since I was 18. I'll be ready on day 1, and I ask for your vote for Dan Williams, Tellor County Commissioner, District 1.
Thank you. Mr. Stone.
20 years ago, my wife and I had the incredible opportunity to choose anywhere in the country to raise our sons. And we chose Tellor County. The conservative values, the love of freedom, the sense of community, and the spectacular landscapes become our slice of heaven on earth. We put our sons through local Woodland Park schools. My wife has taught in Woodland Park High School since we arrived, and both my sons got the pleasure of having their own mother as a teacher, twice. Over the past 5 years, I've become a leader in the Colorado Republican Party. As chairman, I built the Tellor County Republican Party to become not just a strong party, but a model for small counties. We became a leader in the fights to save the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and to defeat the National Popular Vote Compact, which will be on your ballot this fall, so please defeat it. Today, I am delivering on the promise of building a new coalition among county commissioners to protect the natural rights of our citizens. I've spoken about the evils of public debt, and I will keep Tellor County government small, efficient, lean, and debt-free. I stand with our casinos in their battle to reopen. You will have a choice when ballots come out next week. An opportunity to vote someone who has not only pledged to do even more, but has already done more to follow through with my vision of a greater role from your county commissioners. So today I ask you to stand with me. Stand with me as we reopen our economy. Stand with me to preserve the Tellor County that we all love. I will be a champion for Tellor County, and I would be grateful for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rusterhotlz.
I hope this forum has given you a clear view of the passion I have for freedom, my core values and beliefs in the proper role of an elected servant. I'm truly humbled by the great support that's been poured out for our campaign. Hundreds of people have given their time and resources because they too believe our country, our state, and the county are at a tipping point in history. Either we take a stand for our rights now, or we risk losing everything so many have lost their lives fighting for. When I began this race over a year ago, my message was, we are a self-governing people. Elected servants must first and foremost protect our rights and represent our interests. We must reduce and restrain regulations, ordinances, and a never-ending list of laws. Government must work sacrificially for us and not against us. With the events that have unfolded these past 3 months, we have all learned the price extracted from our economy and to the loss of our liberty. Who could have guessed a year ago the prophetic warning of that limited government message? So here's my commitment to you and why I'm asking you for your vote. I will be your representative and bring strong, principled, conservative leadership to ensure a bright and prosperous future for Tellor County. I commit to be your always approachable voice in your county government and your representative to drive intelligent, transparent, accountable decisions. If you believe in limited government and want a commissioner who will defend your rights, a champion for government that gets out of the way and finds a way to say yes, yes to you, yes to your hopes and vision for Tellor County, then I'm asking you for your support, your prayers, and your vote. Thank you. I'm David Rusterhotlz, your candidate for County Commissioner in District 1. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank
Mella.
you. Before my time begins, I'd like to first thank the gentleman here. It's seriously a great distinguished group of men. And I want in particular to commend my opponent, and I like to call him Erik, not my opponent. When he got in the race, I publicly said at the Tellor County Republican Central Committee meeting that I pledged to run a clean and respectful campaign. He immediately reciprocated that. And that is how we've conducted ourselves, and I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again to the Chamber and to Carol Harvey and to all the people of the county. As I said in my introductory remarks, this process is similar to an employment interview, which includes letters of reference. In a political campaign, those are called endorsements. My first endorsement is from the universally respected former County Commissioner, Jim Ignatius. Jim held the same seat I'm pursuing, and he wants me to take over for Commissioner Steen. Second is former Woodland Park Mayor, Councilman, and County Coroner, a pillar of the community, Al Bourne. Third is a former County Commissioner and Woodland Park Mayor, a great voice of reason, Clark Becker. Fourth is a former Woodland Park Mayor, the highly respected Gary Crane. Fifth is a man who served 10 years on the Woodland Park Planning Commission, with whom I served on City Council, the highly esteemed Jeff Baldwin. Sixth is one of the best police chiefs in Woodland Park history, Bob Larson. Next is CPA Gene Kozleski, with whom I enjoyed scouring the budget for savings on City Council. And finally, we have the thoughtful Gene Sperry, current IREA director and a staunch conservative I was proud to serve with on City Council. This is a list of some of the finest and most admired leaders in our county, and they are confident that I would be an exceptional commissioner serving you, the taxpayers, with distinction. I would like to emphasize that during this campaign, I have listened to all residents because I believe that liberty has no political party. We all cherish it. That is exactly how I will conduct myself as county commissioner. Our vote is one of the most sacred rights we Americans have. If you trust me with yours, I pledge to work diligently, thoughtfully, and effectively on your behalf. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless America.
Mr. Mella, thank you for those comments. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the 2020 Tellor County Board of Commissioners Candidates Forum, as well as our 4th Judicial District Candidate Forum for District Attorney. This was hosted by the Greater Woodland Park Chamber of Commerce, and I want to thank all of you for coming and answering the questions. I think this was an exceptional forum. I appreciate your candor, and frankly, I see a bright future for all of us if any one of you are elected to the office that you aspire to tonight. Good night, and have a safe trip home.